My name's Ros Corbett. I'm on the coordinating group of the Landworkers Alliance, and I'm facilitating the session this evening. I'll be sharing some insights and also facilitating between Jean and Marissa, who are speaking here tonight. I was last year, for the last 2 years, working for the Landworkers Alliance on our mobilisation for the COP26 climate talks that happened in Glasgow in November. And so was really looking a lot at the intersection between climate justice and how we mobilise around that, and some of the challenges and experiences that we have with the structures of capitalism that are driving the climate crisis. And so this session is exploring some of those dynamics a lot, exploring some of the experiences from Marissa and Jean in the organisations they work for. And we'll have plenty of time at the end of the session as well, a good 30 minutes or so for Q&A from the audience to have more of a discussion from you. So yeah, the Landworkers Alliance is a union of farmers, growers, foresters and land-based workers with a mission to improve the livelihoods of our members and create a better food and land use system based on the principles of food sovereignty and agroecology. We're also a member of Campesina, which is a global movement of peasants and indigenous people, farmers and farm workers from across the world, representing over 200 million people, and really pushing forward the movement for food sovereignty and agroecology globally. And this session is really a Via Campesina session. We've got 2 speakers from Via Campesina here tonight to share some of our experiences and learning and analysis for the session. Just to introduce the speakers very briefly, but I'll let them speak for themselves in a minute. Jean is from Confédération Paysanne in France and has also been really strongly involved in youth organising with the European coordination of Via Campesina. He's a vegetable, fruit and herb producer in the Basque Country, doing certified organic production, and is an activist working hard to promote peasant-based agroecology as the best way forward for climate justice. So welcome, Jean. And Marissa Reyes-Díaz is from Organización de Agricultura Ecológica in Puerto Rico. She's an activist and farmer and supports climate activism in Puerto Rico through an organization called El Puente, which is a Latino climate action network, and she is also a small-scale farmer. And both Marissa and Jean were in Glasgow for the COP26 talks, so it's really, it was a real honour and pleasure to meet them in Glasgow, and it's really lovely to see them both here this evening as well. So a big warm welcome and thanks to you both for coming. Just to go over the session format very quickly, we're going to pose a few questions to the speakers and they're going to take turns to answer some of those questions. That should take about 30 minutes or so, really looking at the analysis and experiences of peasant farmers. And then as I said, we'll have a Q&A session with the audience. And I think Natalia is posting in the chat box if you have any questions to use the Q&A function in Zoom rather than the chat box, because it's just easier to keep an eye on the questions that are being asked. The session's also being translated. So just if you want to hear translation in French or Spanish, make sure to go down to the bottom of the Zoom window and select the translation stream that you want to hear, whether that's English, French or Spanish. And yeah, if there's any technical problems with that, just post it in the chat and one of the wonderful volunteers will help you. So yes, as I said, this is a Via Campesina session for the Oxford Real Farming Conference, and Via Campesina have a strong tradition of starting all of our sessions with a Mystica, which is a really important way of grounding ourselves and rooting ourselves in the values of our organizing. And they often include sharing of poems or objects or seeds from our farms. And we wanted to start this session with a short mystica. So I've asked Jean and Marissa to bring something to the session that represents hope and struggle. And I'm going to invite them both to share those objects or images with us now. And if you both want to just introduce yourselves as well when you're doing that, that would be lovely. So Marissa's ready. I'll let Marissa go first.
Saludos, mi nombre es Marissa.
Greetings, my name is Marissa, and here I have with you this message which says colonialism caused climate change, and this I hang on my door, but here I use it as a sign of hope and a sign of struggle. This represents the fact that the people at grassroots level use this in their demonstrations in Glasgow, and this is the message that we want to bring from the grassroots level up to the higher level. And so we should remember what is at the grassroots, what the people are sharing, what the people want to say, the voice that they want to pass on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marissa. Jean, would you like to share what you've brought? Some plants.
Oui, bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good evening, everyone. I have two small plants with me tonight. I produce them, that's what I produce on the farm. And then we sell them usually to gardeners. That's how they can garden at home. So we sell them plants using local seeds so they can grow their own vegetables and fruits in their garden. What we want to do is to have a political message, to tell them that they need to take back ownership, that we shouldn't let big corporations have all the power. They shouldn't have the responsibility and the power to feed us. We should feed ourselves, and you can start by doing that at home. That's the first step. You can grow your own food at home. That's a step towards food security, food sovereignty. Agroecology is a grassroots movement, so we need people to take ownership of that. And we want to stand for a people's agroecology.
Thanks, Jean. Some lovely looking seedlings there to give us hope in early January here in the UK. Okay, lovely. So we're going to start the session with a question that I'm going to pose to the speakers. And the session is looking at the dynamics of capitalism and the climate crisis and how food sovereignty and agroecology interacts with those. So the first question I wanted to ask to the Marissa and Jean today is, how do you see capitalism and corporate power impacting on your lives as peasant farmers and the lives of farmers around you in the regions where you work? I'll let Marissa answer first again.
Gracias. Quería mencionar, ¿verdad?
Thank you very much. So first, I'd like to say I'm very grateful for this space. I'm grateful for this space of trust that we have been provided with. Thank you for inviting me here today. And I belong to an organization called Boricua, an agroecological organization. It's an organization which seeks to empower, first and foremost, agroecological farmers, the agroecological farmers of Puerto Rico. And we are a member of the wider movement of Via Campesina. So the work that we do as an organization, the work we do as farmers ourselves, us who actually work the land, well, what we seek to do is to raise awareness. Now, in Puerto Rico, we we suffered colonialism, and we have to understand capitalism in the context of something that is imposed upon us as victims of colonization. We as the Puerto Rican people, well, we find it's very difficult to gain access to land. The power of corporations, the power of capitalism does not allow access to the most basic goods and the most basic needs, such as housing, a roof over your head, and food on your plate. These are such basic things, and having land to grow your own food as well. That's so basic, yet we are denied it. And young people, we're starting to get settled, trying to find ways of having access to land. We're looking at how we can gain access to a patch of land, or maybe a house, or a house where we don't have to pay rent to somebody else, or where a house that is our own. And there is discrimination here, discrimination against young people. We are not given access to land, access to a home, and this is simply because we are Puerto Ricans, victims of colonization. The first suffering we see on a macro level is that laws are brought in to make it easy for foreigners to buy homes, to buy large homes, to buy plots of land, and this increases the value of land for the local people. And it means that it's very difficult for us to gain access to land in our current situation. We have to take on debt, huge amounts of debt, and then there are challenges here. We have to compete with produce coming in from abroad as well. 85% of what is consumed in Puerto Rico comes from outside of Puerto Rico. So what is produced in Puerto Rico is actually very little. Now, there are some people that try to get by however they can. Some people use solidarity mechanisms. They share seeds, they share their harvest, they share their produce, and that's how they get by. And so capitalism is this infrastructure which causes destruction. It imposes mechanisms which are not accessible to us, and also it imposes a form of infrastructure, which means that people are pushed out off the land, or foreigners, on the other hand, are able to come in. They, with their money, they have the right to land. Supposedly, they are able to have livestock production. They're able to buy up land and turn it into a large cattle farm, or even for tourism or for other means. And so now we're really feeling this, and we're looking at what's the next step ahead. What do we have to do as a grassroots movement? How can we build, how can we develop power? How can we grow? How can we provide access to land for our people? We understand that if changes do not take place in terms of public policy, if there are no changes to the economic model, it will be incredibly difficult to overcome the challenges. It will be very difficult to overcome the current climate crisis that we're seeing. And we will see the impacts of this in terms of drought and other impacts on the environment. So this is so we as the Puerto Ricans, this is what we are witnessing. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing that capitalism, agro-industry, large-scale corporations are coming in and preventing access to land for our people. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. Yeah, the dynamics around the financialization of land and how the sort of capitalist commodity markets and flex like agricultural production definitely makes it really challenging to access land here in the UK as well. It's a difficult phenomenon. Imagine it's extremely difficult in Puerto Rico. Jean, would you like to answer this question then? I'll just repeat it as well for you. So how do you see capitalism and corporate power impacting on your lives as farmers and the farmers in your region?
Ouais, merci Ross.
Thank you, Rose. That's a very interesting question. And it's important to put it back into context. So I would like to share a piece of history with you. Capitalism is a model that was imposed on people through colonization in many countries in the global south. Capitalism comes from the global north and from Europe mainly. What happened in Europe after World War II was that farming was seen as something belonging to the past that needed to be modernized. So we changed farming. We turned it into a forced customer of the industry. With pesticides, tools, machines, we forced farmers to buy all those products to serve the capitalist system. And that's what happened with the CAP. The PAC also helped Europeans feed themselves. That's another issue. I'll come back to that later. But capitalism was really imposed on people, on peasants, on family farming. They were sold machines and many other things to force them to join the capitalist system. That's one thing, and that's something we can still see today. I have a very small farm, so they're not interested in me, I'm too small. But I can see that with my neighbors, with other farmers around me in my village. They are constantly asked by the industry, by corporations, to buy the latest tractors, machine. And they also get subsidies, public subsidies from the EU and from national states, from France, to make them want to buy machines, but they are not asked to apply agroecological principles, for example. So we can see there is a problem. The CAP in Europe, and it's similar in the US, the CAP in Europe pushes people to buy technology, to buy machines and equipment, to join the capitalist system. And small farmers like us at Via Campesina, we try to be outside of this system. Our farming is made to feed people. That's our goal. And then there is another negative consequence. It's negative for farmers because they have to borrow money, so they are in debt. They have to work very long hours. They work very hard, but earn little money. And this system, through trade agreements, international trade agreements, forces them to sell their products at a low price. And this in turn has an impact on farmers in the South, because then they have to compete with them. So capitalism really took farming and turned farmers into workers. They receive advice, and then what farmers produce, they have to sell it on international markets. But farming should be the last place where capitalism is needed, because farming should be local. That's the problem today. We produce food for the international market, but we don't produce food to feed people. Farming is supposed to feed people. And another example I could share with you, if I have time, well, it has to do with climate change. The EU proposed recently a new policy to fund practices that are good for the climate. So that sounds good at first. The EU is proposing to help farmers who have more sustainable practices. But when you look at it closely, it's the same problem all over again, because they're going to push farmers to buy the latest technology, the latest machine, the latest robot to do God knows what, to reduce the impact of climate change on their production. But if you are a farmer, an agroecological farmer, then you won't have a negative impact on the climate. And on the opposite, you are going to have a positive impact on the climate. But that's not profitable, so nobody is interested in it. So the EU, in theory, wants to help, but what the EU is going to do is simply fund another round of digitalization, forcing people to buy new technology. So that's not what we want.
Thanks, John. You started to sort of touch upon the possible answer to the next question I was going to ask, but it'll be a good opportunity to go into a bit more detail. So we just talked a little bit about how the dynamics of capitalism are impacting on peasant farmers in terms of land financialization, in terms of agricultural subsidy systems and the type of farming systems that they are supporting, and some of the relation to climate change. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how those dynamics of capitalization are driving the climate crisis. So whether that's about the type of farming that dominates in that kind of capitalist system, or the resilience or ability for peasant farmers to continue farming in that system. Or so yeah, I'll let you answer that question now. Maybe we'll switch it around as well and give Jean opportunity to answer first.
Yes, indeed. This is the link with what we've just said earlier. The current system is based on industry. And the best way to sum up is to say that we are producing producers. We try to find profit, and feeding people is just a bonus. This is not the aim, the target of the system. So this is really a scale economy with a baseline logic that is industry. So how can we cut costs? How can we make it more profitable? And so on. How can we improve efficiency and so on? And the goal really is to make more money out of agriculture. And what is not taken into account is all the external aspects, such as greenhouse gases, health, the quality of food. All of these aspects are not taken into account. So by this way of seeing things, we realize that industrial agriculture, it is said that industrial agriculture is producing more. Of course, yes, if you look at only the production, yes, they produce more, but what is the cost? What is the environmental cost? And what is the quality of this food? And then you see that agroecology, the family of farming, is what is feeding the world. This is the produces we are buying at the market and that are feeding everybody in every country. So as small farmers today, we are defending a different model, a different scheme. And it's not always easy in such a system because we are too small. We are producing different products that do not really fill in the requirements, and they are not respecting what is expected by a system. So it's sometimes difficult to find a way out of this niche production with a very local selling. So it's positive that we sell locally, but it's difficult to go to another scale. So one of the major questions as of today for our movement is to know how we will be able to feed the people. How can we really reach the people that do not have the economic means? How can we help them, feed them? And we are trying to get rid of the capitalist system that is in the middle, that is presented as the solution and is not really. Industrial agriculture is not feeding the people, you know that. So maybe this is the global system as of today. And when we're talking about climate change, of course, industrial agriculture is using more fuel, more pesticides, and they are using different kinds of chemicals. And we are not talking about that. We are always talking about their production, but these are the real issues, because there are too many economic interests at hand.
Thanks, John. There's a lot of support for some of the things that you've been saying in the chat there, and some interesting questions coming forward. But I'll let Marissa now answer that question as well. So how do you see the dynamics about capitalism that are really driving the climate crisis, and what's the link there with the climate crisis, what you can see?
Gracias, Ros, y gracias, John.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you, Jen. I think that Jen mentioned really important things, and I would like to highlight a point that he had mentioned. Capitalism supports capital and moves thanks to capital. That is what pushes capitalism. And us, as little farmers, agroecological farmers, we think from the health of the land, from health of the plants. We do not think of capitalism because we want that our plants grow in a good way in order to be able to sell them properly. But then we are in a capitalist system because maybe I have to pay for a housing. And that's really important to see how do we think to go for a transition, because we are inside the system and we need to break all these barriers. And this is going to be the hardest part, because in the transition moments, those who are more vulnerable are the ones who suffer the consequences. The people who has more money, they're not going to suffer. Climate crisis shows injustices, because we do know that we are all going to suffer, but we are not all going to suffer at the same level. It really depends on our level of life. And talking about the climate crisis and how is it linked, I think that there's different facts. From COP26 and before that moment, we were talking about false solutions and how they want to get to false solutions to produce a more productive agriculture. And we know that right now we produce food in order to feed humanity. We have the struggle of hunger, and it is due to distribution, not because of food, the lack of food. And what we have to do is to produce locally, because when we go to the corporative level, we think about production for feeding animals. They think about creating new seeds, and they think about exporting, but they do not think about feeding the people who live in that area. And this has a higher cost when we talk about the footprint. And if what we want to do is to extract all the resources of the land, what I'm doing is to increase this carbon footprint. So we need to, over here in Puerto Rico, we have another threat, and we are working on the urgent need to transition to a green energy, a clean energy. Puerto Rico is located in the Caribbean, and over here we have a huge exposure to the sunlight. However, we are a small island. We are in the center of hurricanes, and we suffer from hurricanes. And right now, laws, they are promoting green energy. But it means that lands, agricultural lands, are not used for producing food because they don't want to give us access to the land, but these lands are available to have green energy. So we have this dilemma. Yes, definitely we need clean energy, but which is the cost that we have to pay for? Food sovereignty, losing our agrarian lands, because they are really degrading the soil. So we think about capital before climate crisis. And if we keep on thinking about capital before people, we are not going to find a solution to the basic problem. We are the more vulnerable, and we are the one who suffer the most. So I think that it is really important to understand where do solutions come from, and we do not want to accept false solutions. Because what we are doing with false solution is to promote injustice and promote this climate crisis for poor countries.
Thanks, Marissa. There's there's some questions in the chat about different types of technology and financing, and we'll come back to those because I think they definitely touch on the question of false solutions and some of the solutions that get framed as solutions but are maybe damaging or challenging peasant agriculture, and we can kind of unpick the distinction between different types of technologies and finance mechanisms a little bit later with the Q&A session. But thanks for raising that really important concept that Via Campesina often works with when we talk about climate justice and the climate crisis, that there are a lot of false solutions, but that agroecology and food sovereignty are true solutions and really strong solutions to the climate crisis, and framed in a sort of climate justice way. And we've talked a lot, you've talked a lot about the challenging dynamics of capitalism and climate change, but because Via Campesina often always is putting forward the positive solution of agroecology and food sovereignty, wanted to ask you both to talk a little bit about what your organizations are doing in your countries and regions to support positive solutions to the climate crisis, and building solidarity with farmers and building the agroecology movements in your areas. So I'll let Marissa answer that first. So the positive solutions that you're working on to tackle the climate crisis.
Sorry, as I was saying, indeed, we try to find, we are aware of the problems, but we are there also to find the solutions. So as I was saying, as agroecological farmers, we have to be aware of the health of our animals, the health of our plants. We have to be aware of that. We have to mitigate the impacts of climate change, adapt or somehow manage the impact of climate change. We have to look at practices that allow us to adapt. We understand that this is a great challenge, and for all of us who produce food in one way or another, it's something we have to think about. We don't necessarily always have all of these practices written down on paper or ancestral knowledge, and it's not necessarily something you can look up in a book. It's something that is passed on, and it allows us to produce in the particular area in question. And the variations of the climate, that's in ancestral knowledge. So when you should sow which crop and why, this knowledge is knowledge that that is handed down, and it's knowledge that has to adapt to changes as they happen. And we need to favor the conditions which allow us to adapt in a swift manner so that we can be ready for any changes that come in. Now, we are in the hurricane corridor in our archipelago, and so that means that we have to adapt very quickly. We have to be able to respond to any emergency that may arise, and agroecology allows this to happen. It's ultimately what allows us to be able to have safe food in our homes, ready for our communities, for our people. And now, thinking of the issue that brings us together here today, capitalism and the climate. Well, agroecology, what we try to do in our organization, what we try to maintain is mutual work and cooperatives. So these are models that break away from the conventional idea of capitalism. We try to work together. We try to pool our efforts so that we can work in a spirit of solidarity, in a spirit of cooperation. These are the models that we have to spread, that we have to extend. The traditional knowledge that we seek to share this is something that has to be done in a joint manner. We should not think of the competitive models that are imposed upon us through capitalism. We should understand that we don't have much time available. Therefore, the solutions that we seek, they have to be ones that we can put in practice quickly. It has to be something that we can apply immediately. And agroecology allows that to happen because you can come together with those around you and think about what is the best solution. It's not just following some solution imposed from afar. It's not that you have to buy some fertilizer from far away and then you just throw that on your land and then that solves the problem. No, it's working with those around you, looking at your surroundings, looking at how you can provide nutrition for those in the homes near your plot of land and how you can adapt to the of environments that you have. So it's about having soil which has biodiversity, working together with others, cooperating with others, and understanding the land so that you can break away from the capitalist individualist model and move more towards a collective model. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. When I first met some of your comrades from Puerto Rico, it was amazing hearing about the solidarity brigades and the organizations that you've done after hurricanes and how that's really strengthened the networks of agroecological farmers there. So it's really amazing and inspiring work that you guys do, and really amazing to follow. We'll come back to Europe and ask Jean the same question. So how do you see agroecology and food sovereignty as posing solutions to the climate crisis, and how are you organizing around those agroecology in France and with ECVC, and maybe also with the youth branch of ECVC that you're working with?
Oui, merci Ross, et merci Marissa pour cette intervention.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you, Marissa, for this incredible speech. I think you've really mentioned many true aspects. First, let me remind you something. There's not only one agroecology. People always think about agroecology as a kit, a solution, a magical solution. No, that's not the case. Us, as farmers, we work with living things. We work with life, and life is always moving, changing. So there's not one single solution that would be applicable to everything. This is nonsense. If you work with soil, you know that. Climate might change from a year to another, and not only with climate change. You can have summer coming later. So each year is different. Each area also is different. Each region, you have different soil, different rain level, and different also social and cultural aspects and backgrounds. So this all impacts agroecology. So there's not only one single agroecology, there are many agroecologies according to the reality of the territory. So you have to define what would be agroecology in your area. It has to answer the local issues, the local needs, and also the social needs of the area. That's what you have to take into account when you are trying to do agroecology. So you have to work in the territories for the territories, in the lands for the lands, with solidarity with the peasants, but also with the rest of social society, civil society. So there are many agroecologies, and this is the sum of all these agroecologies that makes this concept of agroecology. You have to remind it. It's a challenge for us. You see the capitalistic people coming saying, oh, you are talking about agroecology, so tell me what it is. How should we do? No, I cannot give them a concrete answer. They think that there is only one solution with a chemical or a different product. When they are creating, for example, GMO, that's what they are doing. They use only one plant and copying it again and again and again with the same tractor, with the same machine, the same equipment. This is nonsense. This is not the logic behind agroecology. Agroecology is about diversity. Diversity of the techniques, the productions, and solutions. So first of all, I would say that agroecology is a philosophy for me, a way of thinking about agriculture, related to the land, to the people, taking into account all elements. You have to think about the land. It's more of a philosophical aspect than technical aspect. But then after that, you have the technical aspect coming to answer the needs you have. But this is a concept, really, a way of thinking that is agroecology. And Marissa said something interesting. If you're thinking this way, you can get to adaptability. If you have a system that is only about one solution, this is a fixed system. It cannot change. This is the system they want to impose on us. The capitalist system wants to impose on us. Why? Because it's easy to manage, easy to understand, easy to control also. They can know who does what, when, and where. It's very important to them. So diversity in the techniques, in the methods, is how we can adapt to climate, to the changes between different years. So agroecology really allows you, in this kind of concept, to see an issue, think about the different parameters with the actors on the ground, and you can have technical solutions, but you can also have cultural solutions. And you try to find solutions and go forward. Why? Because agriculture is about living things. It's about life. We are living beings. We are not robots. We change, we evolve. We have needs that can evolve and change. So we have to be able to listen to this living part inside us to understand what is happening on our lands. I could talk about agroecological techniques, technology that I use in my farm, but it would be nonsense because it wouldn't work out in your particular setting. What I can do is encourage you to do the research. It's very important, and I have hope because I see more and more people, citizens, farmers that are working together to find new solutions to some issues they face, and they create farms that are incredible with a good production, very resilient, very few entrants, and great adaptability to climate change. So really, this is what we have to encourage. And this is how I come back on what I was saying when I was showing you my plants. My message is this one. I will not teach you how to make food. No. I will teach you how to really, I will encourage you to put your hands in the soil and try to find the solutions. Of course, solidarity is essential. It's crucial. And I will finish on that. La Via Campesina is working on this. We are trying to encourage in each region peasants, farmers to work together to exchange, to learn from each other, and also create links with the civil society to become more resilient. And so agroecology is about food solidarity. It's the same idea. We are trying to produce in the country for the people, by the people. We want to take back control on what we are doing, on what we are eating.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jean and Marissa. There's some really strong and amazing things that you said in there. I really like the call to understanding agroecology as being really culturally and locally situated, and that we all have to kind of get our own heads around what it means for us as farmers to be working agroecologically in our own local context and with our own environment around us. I think that's important to understand agroecology in that way, and that's how the locally based solutions arise. So I think that's really great to frame it in that way. And I think it's also really important that we've heard this evening from farmers who are working on the land about the experiences of capitalism and climate, and how you work with the concepts of agroecology in your own cultural situations and economic situations. So thank you so much for sharing some of those insights and experiences with us. We've got a lot of really great questions, which we'll start to answer now. So if you have any more questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll try and get through them all. There's quite a few, and they're on some of them are on some pretty substantial and technical topics. And it's been great also following the chat and some of the discussion and debate around economic paradigm shifts and whether that's possible and how we might create those paradigm shifts. And it's really amazing conversation to follow. So thank you everyone for engaging in the chat and discussion in such an enthusiastic and interesting way. I am going to take the first question from Bill Grayson. And it relates to some of what Marissa talked about in her first answer about access to land, and is something that a lot of people in the chat were also saying was a challenge in their areas. And I think it relates also to this being able to understand agroecology in our own locality and cultural setting. If we can't have access to land or mechanisms that support us to have access to land in the first place, how do we build an ecology movement? So this access to land seems like a critical question in some ways. So Bill Grayson asks, do you have any suggestions for improving access to land in Puerto Rico, Marissa? Where do the wealthy buyers come from who are buying the land in Puerto Rico? And maybe are there like mechanisms or things that organizations that you work with are setting up to try and support access to land in Puerto Rico? And Jean, if you have examples from France as well, feel free to answer.
Mira, requiere muchos esfuerzos de distintos frentes, ¿verdad?
Yes, there's a lot of work necessary on several different fronts. It's not just one single solution. So our organizations are indeed supporting farmers locally, looking at how we can bolster agroecology. And recently, we have been working so as to try to strengthen access to land. And really, it's about, well, a huge increase in the price of land. And so people buy a certain number of hectares, and we have to look at how capitalism is dominating the market. And so we have to look at how access can be provided in a fair, just way, so that we can actually have agroecology taking place. But unfortunately, people find that they are not able to buy property, they're not able to buy land. They try to come together in collectives, or sometimes we pay rent in a group. So we work as tenant farmers sharing the cost of rent. Now, I don't have the capital. I don't have anyone who can provide me with credit either. So we have to come together ourselves. And so when food security is a priority for the people, then we can actually work. But for as long as it's not a priority for the government, then we can't really work. And that's the great challenge that we're facing. It's what we have to think about. Now, from the grassroots level, we have to be able to come together and strengthen our collective work. We have to strengthen the work that we're doing. But at the same time, we need to develop public policy which is in line with the actual needs of the time. And if we're not open to doing that grassroots work, then we are complicit in the system. And so we have to find a way of making it very clear that the solution is really at the grassroots level, and the work has to be done by the people. We have to be the ones providing the driving force for changes in public policy, for changes in the authorities, for changes in the more long term. So it's a diversity of solutions that are needed, but really agroecology is at the heart of all of what we do. And as Jean was saying, we have to be connected with where we are. We have to be connected to our local areas and understand what climate change is. It's not just using the conventional capitalist methods, not turning towards those methods, because often they can be used as an excuse for that, or excuses can be put together. Excuses and false solutions to climate change, which don't solve the situation for us on the ground. And so this is the view from Puerto Rico, is what we're doing from the grassroots level with all of the challenges that we have. It's far from easy. And this experiment that, well, we've been experimenting here in Puerto Rico. We've been saying that we have people asking every day if they can buy land. We're asking people to put out messages every single day, make phone calls and send out messages, send out emails, send out letters, do whatever you can, trying to stress that you need to have access to land. The people at the grassroots level need access to land, and they need to be able to buy land or to have land somehow. You need to think using different structures. It's moving away from the capitalist structure and looking at what are the other ways in which we can have a process that helps us to move forward. And one of the most significant methods is to support local production. Always support local production. Is that way that you can help access to land, because then people will understand the situation. They'll understand what's happening. They will understand that there's a need to move away from the large-scale capitalist views, because that doesn't respond to the needs of the people on the ground who actually want to feed themselves locally with local food. So how can we put the cogs in motion so as to ensure that we are looking at local solutions, not solutions imposed from the outside, which are destroying nature? Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. Bill was also asking about, do you know where the wealthy buyers come from when they're purchasing the land in Puerto Rico? And it might not be something that you can answer, because I know in a lot of countries there's a lack of transparency around who buyers and sellers are in the market and how the land market operates. So it might not even be something that you know, but do you know where these wealth interests are coming in terms of access, buying the land?
Mira, no podemos decir que
we cannot really say that there is this or that country. However, we can say that Puerto Rico, it is presented to the world, especially to the United States, like a paradise, a fiscal paradise, where if you, as a foreigner, you come and you move to Puerto Rico, just because you move, you present some taxes to the government. And the way of reducing your taxes to the government is what motivates people. And then we have a law that can define some areas as opportunity areas. That there are some areas that have some capacity to develop thanks to external capital. The idea is to increase development. And we can think that this is positive. However, the truth is that they don't give the same facilities for the foreigners and for the people from Puerto Rico. The foreigner is the one who has the capital and is the one who can come here. And right now, the 95% of we have 95% of things that are available for foreigners to be able to develop Puerto Rico. And the people from here in Puerto Rico, they are the ones kicking us away of the island. They don't want us here. And one of the resistance is to plant the lands, to plant against all these problems. And we need the support from people. We need them to buy our products, and they need to understand that our products, local products, are the one who has to be consumed. And we need to continue motivating the increase of local consume. Agrobusiness. They are not farmers. They are CEO. They are corporations. They are just some people who are in an office. They are not people who are on the field. What really matters is land workers who are suffering from labor exploitation. And we need to understand that this model cannot be sustainable. And we need to support farmers. And little farmers are the ones who are going to give us a sustainable way of life.
Excellent, thanks, Marissa. And Jean, do you want to say anything about the sort of who's buying land in France, and are there any mechanisms that are supporting people to access land for agroecology in France that are kind of resisting that dynamic of financialization and land grabbing?
Oui, alors c'est une question centrale et très complexe.
That's an essential question and a complex one. I can't go into too much detail here about French law, but to make things easier, after World War II in France, we were lucky because at some point it was the Resistance National Council that was in power. It was the same council that fought the Nazis during the war. So they had very interesting ideas, especially about land, and there were interesting reforms at the time. A system was implemented. It still exists today. It's not a capitalist system at all. It's a price check system. That means that in France, you can't sell or buy lands freely. It's not a free market, a capitalist market. It's a controlled market by the government. The government sets the prices depending on several factors, depending on where the land is. And the landowner in France can't sell them or rent them above the price set by the government. So we have a controlled market. In theory, that's a very good thing. That means that in France, compared to our neighbors, land prices in France are lower. That means that French farmers own their lands most of the time, or at least they are very protected. That's good news. obviously there is a problem because capitalists are always very good. So because they can't get rid of this system, they find ways around it. There are several methods. First, by creating companies, so private investors or banks that get into partnerships with farmers, and they use the farmer's name to buy the land. And secondly, there is no limit on the area of land that people can buy. So that means we have larger and larger farms. That means that now a young farmer who wants to buy land struggles to find land, not because the prices are high, but because there is no land available to buy. Current farmers already have very big farms, and they always try to buy more. So the more you have, the easier it gets to buy more land. On the one hand, in France, in theory, we have a very good system, but once again, unfortunately, capitalists find ways around it, and they get what they want. So the situation isn't as bad as in other places, but we have to be very careful. The Confédération Paysanne is very careful. We try to protect those rights we have.
Thanks, John. And that's a really interesting example from France about the how the land markets are regulated and the relative degree of success that gives, although it's not perfect as well. I'm sure there's lots of critiques you could offer of how that works. We spent a long time answering one question and there's still 18 questions left to answer. So we're going to rattle through a few more and maybe ask for slightly briefer answers. One question that came in for Jean from Clive Blacker. Can Jean explain why financial support to buy new technology won't benefit agroecological farming? So I guess maybe a bit of a distinction around what different types of technologies and appropriate technologies are for agroecological farmers.
Je pense que c'est la question.
That's the question we need to ask when it comes to that. That's a very difficult question. First, technology is a very wide, broad concept. It can mean many things. It's very difficult to talk about technology. What we do as agroecological farmers is technological because we do something that's perfectly adapted to the territory we work in. We went through a process of understanding nature locally, what happens between insects, animals, plants. It's a very complex process, but it's not what we could call gadget technology, objects, for example. Unfortunately, European institutions or governments see technology as objects, as gadgets, phones, drones, robots, that kind of things. That's what technology means to them. But we don't want that kind of technology. That's our problem. And often we are told that we are backwards people, that we don't want to move forward. But that's not true. We are in favor of technology. And in our farms, we have cutting edge technology. But that doesn't mean we need to buy robots. Here, there's a misunderstanding between us and them, between the two models. And I think there's a simple explanation. Our technology isn't profitable. It doesn't give money to anyone. Because once again, it's based on nature, on understanding nature, on human science. And it's not based on corporations, but their corporation, their robots, drones, etc., that's very expensive and made by companies. The problem is that our technology doesn't make any money. So they try to sell their technology. We can see that in Europe, connected GPS, tractors, robots to milk cows. They picture this as innovations, fantastic innovations. Of course, probably there are some technological inventions that could be interesting, but in general, the idea that a robot is going to solve all our problems doesn't work. Once again, it's agribusiness. If you only have one species of cow, then perhaps you can solve your problems with whatever tractor. But what matters is to have people work the land, to give them a job and a dignified job, to give meaning to what we do. So we don't want that kind of technology. We don't need that kind of technology. And of course, it's very expensive. So once again, we enslave farmers because they have to borrow money, then they are in debt, then they need to buy another machine, etc. For many of us at La Via Campesina, there are several things that are very problematic when it comes to technology. First, control. Technology, that kind of technology is controlled by corporations. A farmer with a connected GPS tractor is going to be helpless if the tractor breaks. So that means the farmer is no longer able to choose what they want to do in the farm. That's the first problem. They lose autonomy. Farmers lose autonomy. We want a technology that we understand and that we control. We want to be able to fix our technology if we need to. We want democracy in technology. That was the issue of control. And then there are resources. We shouldn't forget that all those objects are not environmentally friendly. Because to build them, to make them, we need rare earths, we need steel, and the production costs of those machines make them the opposite of environmentally friendly. That's a real issue. And we often forget about that. The mining industry first impacts farmers. In Puerto Rico, there are many mines. There's pressure from the mining industry. And often we are told that those mines are needed. But here, I think we need to think about the technology we want, how to make it. We need to think about that. We need to think it through. If we include all those issues of making the technology and control, who controls the technology, then we can have many different types of technology. And another example, digitalization. There is a lot of pressure currently from many governments. They want to digitalize agriculture because supposedly it's going to reduce the impact of climate change. But I'm very worried about that because that means we are going to need data servers, etc. And who owns those servers? Google, Amazon. They're going to get all the farming data. So here there's once again a problem of autonomy. Using digitalization to improve agricultural work is a problem. We need to think that through. We need to know why we do things.
Thanks. A very solid answer about some of the principles that we as farmers might want to use when assessing whether a technology is going to be good or bad for us, and what kind of dependency and financial debt that might get us into. Is really important things to raise in deciding about the appropriateness of technologies for agroecology. I'm going to run on to another question, and this is from an anonymous attendee. It's a really interesting one about understanding finance and making decisions about or how we decide what kind of finance is ethical or positive for the agroecology movement, and what finance might be problematic when we think about investment in agroecology. So anonymous attendee says, science-based sustainable finance instruments are being developed, which could provide important amounts of investment to agroecological projects. How would the panelists view such support as a capitalist enterprise or as a step in the right direction? I'll let maybe Marissa answer first, and just a plea to speakers to keep the answers briefer so that we can answer some more of the questions too.
Yeah, I'm looking for the question to be sure that I understood it properly, but I wanted to add that capitalism survived thanks to externalities. So we need to understand that for it to be okay in a country, there are other countries that are suffering due to the exploitation of resources and exploitation of the workforce. We understand that we have had this model of capitalism for a long time, and it is surviving because of these externalities, because of the exploitation. Indigenous people in the United States, they were thinking on the future. How will my actions will have an impact in the following 7th generations, and will they have the resources? When we talk about a fair transition, we talk about the same thing. We cannot think only about just one generation, and it is what we are doing right now. Last year, we consumed in summer the resources available for the whole year. So after August, we were consuming resources for the next year, for future generations. And until we do not understand this concept properly, we won't be able to think in different ways of production, because they are not sustainable. We are sacrificing some people in order to support others. Then, concerning the question, the solutions science-based, I think that there's a lot of knowledge developed from the science and from the agroecology. But these are not recipes that we can do from one day to another, and that they can be applied all around, because agroecology, it is not a book recipe that we can do. And I think that there are some guarantees that we need to have. And I'm also answering some other questions talking about guarantees. For example, having access to water, to some other resources. And people are asking themselves why agroecology is so expensive, and why it's not so accessible, and why bioproducts are so expensive. Because they are produced by farmers, by people. They are produced in plots in some countries with low resources, and that's the reason, because they are local products. They're reducing the cost in the countries, and we need to understand that there are some solutions that they are being developed at an agroecological level, and that's why we need to work together. And from our organization, we do some exchange of seeds, of knowledge, of skills, of tools, and that is what allows us to be good with the product. So how can we exchange? Those are the solutions, grassroots solutions. And I'm not saying that these are the quickest process, but those are process that will last on time. And I can say that I still have some ancestral seeds on my space. And this is thanks to some farmers who were just keeping these seeds along the time. And those are the seeds that are better adapted. They are not the seeds where I have to use a lot of fertilizers to make them grow. Those are some seeds that I do not want on my land. And there's so many farmers that they don't want this kind of seed. Those are the technologies that they are proposing. There are good technologies that come from scientific sectors. And this is why we need to have these kind of spaces, because we need to exchange knowledge and exchange our ideas. But if we focus on the technology produced in other way, they are not a solution for the farmers that live out of the land.
Yeah, very important points, Marissa, and understanding that capitalism is extremely exploitative and impacting on a lot of indigenous people and peasant farmers globally, and bringing us back to that point always as an important reminder. And some of the solutions in seeds and seed sovereignty as well. Jean, would you like to also talk about this question about science-based sustainable finance instruments and whether they could be viewed as positive for agroecological projects or capitalist enterprises? Do you have any examples or things to draw on for that question?
About finance, there are so many things I could say, but we've been hearing quite a lot about blockchain lately and all the technologies linked with digital technologies for financing. And I must say that we are coming back on the aspect of control. Who is behind that? Even if this technology is presented as something that is decentralized, that is independent, no, there are people making money out of it. Also, I have an issue with green finance. If you have someone that comes to finance agroecology, he has great ideas, but if it's dirty money, do you accept it? That's a great question. If someone is ready to finance great projects with small farmers, but he made his money while exploiting people somewhere else, do you accept this money? I will tell you, you have the right to answer this question the way you want, but at La Via Campesina, we are not accepting money that is coming from anywhere. And you have a great example with the charities in the US, such as the ones from Bill Gates. They say that they are trying to help the people in the world, but they are hand in hand with Monsanto and other big industries, and he's there only to further his agenda. Just saying that he will help for anger in the world, but it's just trying instead to make money, honestly. So, about financing, I think the best is the local level. You have to link the people, the local people, with the producers, with the farmers, decrease the number of intermediaries, to get rid of these intermediaries and try to find really adequate solutions. We should not, I'm not saying that we should be totally isolated from the rest of the world, but you should always be wary that you could get trapped in this system. But at the end of the day, we never have enough money for all our projects, so it's not easy to answer that. You always have to look at the situation in the context, with the background, and everybody can make the decision. And I know that people that are really close to what is the living will be able to make the right decision.
Thanks, Jean. I think we have time for just one more question. and I'm I'm really sorry to everyone that's posted questions and they haven't been answered. But yeah, there's been great discussion as well in the chat. And the last question I'm going to ask is about this solidarity and working with other organizations, which you just touched upon a bit, Jean, and is really central to Via Campesina and the work that we do to unite peasant struggles globally. And the original question comes, I think, from Edward MacDonald, I think, and he asked Marissa, please can you explain if Puerto Rico have worked with La Via Campesina in Cuba to help farmers develop their agroecological methods to feed more people in a just way there, and so if you want to answer that about how Puerto Rico works with Cuba, and also any other kind of solidarity links that both of you have with other Via Campesina organizations and networks globally. And that would be a nice question to end on.
Gracias. Y de hecho, justo contesté la pregunta. Pensé que
yes, thank you. Well, I did actually answer briefly in writing in the chat or in the question and answers box, but yes, Via Campesina recognizes Puerto Rico as one of the key areas of work, and we do cooperate with others across the Caribbean and Latin America, and this enriches our work. What we should really stress is that in Cuba they have agrarian policies which favor agroecology, which support agroecology, and there are huge incentives for agroecological production. There's a great deal of support. So yes, these are two countries very close to each other, and we do have mechanisms to help our processes. But in Puerto Rico, we don't have a government policy in favor of agrarian priorities, and so we want to bring about change here. We don't want to be an island of photovoltaic solar panels. We need to look at how we can actually have food production and also have energy production, because we cannot lose our land to energy production to solar panels. But we have to understand the situation. For as long as we have governments that are in favor of capitalism, that are in favor of certain vested interests, that for as long as that happens, we're not able to think about future generations and their needs. We're just thinking about the here and now and solving issues immediately, but not in the long term. Therefore, we need agrarian policies based on local aspects, and we have to take hold of what is out there. We have to take what we have learned from our brothers and sisters in Cuba and elsewhere, and we have to look at how we can develop agrarian policy which is much more in line with our principles of solidarity, of mutual support among farmers, among small-scale farmers, and helping other farmers around Latin America and the Caribbean. So these links are indeed incredibly important. They allow us to exchange knowledge, to create dynamism in what we do. Thank you very much for that question.
Thanks, Marissa. And Jean, very quickly, because we have volunteers and interpreters that we're keeping back, but if you just wanted to say a couple of words about solidarity and what that means to you as a final wrap-up question, that would be really nice.
Oui, non, très vite, je pense qu'on
So quite quickly, we've talked extensively about it. LVC has at its core solidarity. Solidarity between different social classes, social categories, the peasants, the people. But we are also trying to create new links between the small farmer, but also the workers in the city, recreate this relationship between people to find new solutions to the problem that is capitalism. Then, the international solidarity. What I find so beautiful about LVC, La Via Campesina, is that as peasants, we all work on the same thing. We work on soil, we work on feeding people, we work on something that is alive. This is what makes us different. We have very much different backgrounds, different cultures, but we work on soil and we work on feeding people. So we have this common aspect. And solidarity is an evidence then, when you understand that. So I would like also to thank the interpreters, because I was quite late and I could not prepare with them, but I also share my solidarity with the interpreters. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Via Campesina always is keen to support language justice and solidarity with all interpreters who help us do really important exchange work and tirelessly offer their time for us. So thank you for the interpreters this evening. And yeah, thank you both to the speakers for your time and sharing your insights with us. It's been really lovely to see you again and really great to hear from you. And thank you to the Oxford Rural Farming Conference team of volunteers for doing an excellent tech session. It's worked really well. Thank you everyone for your conversations in the chat and the questions, and sorry again for not answering them. And yeah, please do check out the Landworkers Alliance and Via Campesina and support us and continue to support our work. Great. Good evening, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference over the next couple of days. Thanks and goodbye.